Hello, welcome back to my studio. Today's picture is called An Early Morning Walk. The colours we're going to be using is light red, raw sienna, ultramarine blue and burnt umber. I've stretched the paper and now I'm just wetting it from the top down to the horizon line with just clean water. I'm picking up a mix of colour here of raw sienna and light red and just going across from left to right and right to left, just covering the piece of paper from the top down to the horizon line. We're working wet into wet. Making it a little bit darker just above the horizon line by adding a little bit of the light red to the raw sienna, creating a very warm orange glow. I'm picking up now some more colour, just adding it in at the top with a little bit more light red into the colour mix. I'm just going to clean my brush and then pick up a mixture of colour of ultramarine blue and light red and just give me a little soft purple colour here. And I'm starting from the right hand side and working my way across just off centre of the page, working wet into wet, and this will give us a nice soft sky. Just continue blending these colours together, picking up some water, clean water, touching my brush on a tissue and then sweeping across from left to right and blending these colours together. Because this is wet into wet, it will give us a nice soft sky. Picking up a little bit more of the colour of the sienna and the red and just sweeping it in and out. Gently with the brush, taking off some of those brush marks, and then I've wrapped up a coin in a tissue, touched it on the paper and lift it away, and there's your sun, a perfect round circle. Got to leave that to dry, as you can see, dry a third lighter, and now I'm going to wet with just clean water about a third of the way up into the sky, and this is to get ready for some distant trees. Picking up a round brush, picking up some ultramarine blue and a little bit of light red to give me a very soft purple colour, and then just dabbing these trees into the wet paper to give me a soft edge. Using the tip and the heel of the brush, just working in some shapes of trees. Making sure that the paper is still damp as I'm working across. Got to keep these trees in line with the horizon line. Just picking up different tonal values of the same colour by adding more water to them to give them a weaker colour, and as I get closer down the bottom I pick up a darker mix with less water. And again, these will dry about a third lighter. And just using the brush and tilting it up and down, left to right, and just doing a dabbing motion to give the impression and texture of leaves. Putting a few small ones in. keeping the line straight along the horizon line. Just adding a little bit more of the darker colour now. Just adding it in nearer the bottom part of the tree. This is starting to dry off now, the paper, which works out really well for us because we're going to pick up the same colour, and on the right hand side we're going to add another tree. This will make the tree slightly darker because the paper is dry now. We're going to just work that in down to the horizon line and leaving a small gap between the two trees in the distance. So working all the colours in there. The colours I'm using here is the raw sienna with a little bit of light red to it to give me an orange tone, and I've added a little bit of blue just to give it a green tint. I'm working this across the hedge down to the front. As it gets closer towards me, obviously the hedge gets bigger. Just working in the colours, scratching it into the top of the surface of the paper. Just finishing off here, I'm going to leave that to dry. And I'm cleaning my brush and picking up my flat brush using the colour of raw sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue to give me a very light green. And then I'm sweeping it in from the top down off to the bottom of the page, keeping the horizon line as straight as possible and just working this colour in, a very light wash. And I'm going to be picking up a little bit more of a darker colour, so adding a bit more blue to the same mix, which is raw sienna, making it slightly darker green. I'm going to start at the top again and work my way across and draw it down just off the bottom of the page. Keeping the horizon line as straight as possible. And I'm going to leave this to dry. And now I'm going to pick up another brush and I'm going to use the same colours but more blue to the raw sienna to make a dark khaki green. And with the heel of my brush and the tip, like the same technique with the trees, I'm just creating a small hedgerow across the back of the field. Keeping it quite small at the back for the distance. Picking up some more of the colour in a moment and starting from the top right hand corner of the hedge, working my way down to the front. Just making a darker mix here and making the hedgerow much taller, obviously because it's near the front. Just using the heel of the brush and just pushing upwards, scratching into the surface of the paper, leaving little marks representing grasses and foliage coming through the tall hedgerow that we're going to have at the front. slightly darker colour here, and what I've done is I've used the Ultramarine Blue, Burnt Umber, and a little bit of the raw Sienna. And using a combination of all these colours, you're going to get a lovely marbled effect of multiple colours that you'll find in a hedgerow at this time of the day. The brush is quite dry, and it will break up the top of the hedge to give the impression of leaves and foliage. Just working my way up and down this hedgerow with multiple colours of the raw sienna, light red and ultramarine blue to give me all these wonderful colours. As you see here, I'm just scratching with my fingernail into the wet paint and using the brush as well, just by flicking upwards, giving the impression of grasses. Going to be working my way along this hedgerow by adding different tonal values of the colours we've been using. Just breaking up the top edge. Just adding a little bit more dark colour to the front, picking up a little bit more and just adding it nearer the front end just to make this slightly darker as it comes closer. I'm going to leave it to dry, and now I'm picking up just clean water and run it over the path section of the picture. We're going to work this wet into wet, just making sure it's all covered and the edge is nice and straight. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some raw sienna and a little bit light red, and I'm going to start from the top and work my way down to the bottom end of the picture. This is going to be a nice soft wash. Picking up a little bit more of the darker colour. I want the left hand side of this picture to be slightly darker than the left hand side, and I'm thinking of shadows from under the hedgerow, so I'm picking up a slightly darker colour here and just run it along the side of the path. And in a moment I'm going to put in a darker bank on the right hand side once this has dried. Just a little bit more darker just here and up to the edge. This is all still wet into wet. Just making it a little bit darker along the edge of the hedgerow by adding a little bit of blue to the raw sienna and light red. Just very gently with the brush, Don't push too hard. And now what I'm doing is I'm picking up some Ultramarine Blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of raw sienna. I let the paper dry, and now I'm just brushing in a bank on the right hand side, leading up onto the path. Keeping it as straight as possible with the horizon line, and leaving a little gap there in the distance. I'm just continuing to put on the bank on the right hand side with the burnt umber, ultramarine blue and raw sienna. Adding more blue to it and more brown to darken it down as it gets closer. Little brush movements just to give a sense of texture on the surface of the bank. Picking up some more paint. Quite a dry brush I've got here. So controlling the paint with a tissue. I'm now picking up some more and just flicking up into the surface of the paint to give the impression of grasses coming through. In a moment I'm going to just leave that to dry, as you can see, and now I've just picked up raw sienna on its own and I'm painting in a small tree trunk about a third of the way up into the picture, working my way up into the sky. Making it slightly wider with the raw sienna. In a moment I'm going to break off and put some branches in, but first of all I'll just get the trunk in. And they're using the raw sienna and they're making a branch to the right of the tree and up to the left and making it slightly taller. You can put your trees wherever you like if you're copying with me and following along. You make them as big or as small as you want them. I'm now just painting a little bit of dark colour on the right hand side of the tree, and the colour is ultramarine blue and burnt umber. And I'm adding this onto the right hand side as it's in the shadow, where the light is coming from the left hand side. Anything on the right hand side will be a darker shade. Just adding a few branches in. And now I'm going to just make that slightly wider. Picking up some more paint of the raw sienna. And I'm going to come in with another little tree here, starting through the hedgerow, coming up. This one's going to be slightly smaller. Just a few little branches on this one. Putting a few branches in here, just spreading out a little bit. I'm going to be picking up some more paint. And bringing in the darker side of the tree. going to put in another tree here, again with the raw sienna. This one's going to be much taller than the rest as it's closer. And I'm just going to go up. This one's going to go nearly off the top of the page, making the trunk slightly wider. And just follow it up. This scene is typical of country lanes and paths around, not far from where I live. And you get these lovely hedgerows with these trees that just grow out of them, bearing fruit in the summertime and spring. Lots of lovely flowers, very colourful. And again, I'm just making it slightly wider here, and making the branches a little thicker, ready to take all the foliage. I'm now mixing up a darker colour of the Ultramarine Blue and Burnt Umber. I'm running this up on the right hand side. This tree is slightly dry, so you do this up on this side with the darker colours, and then when you've got the colours on and where you want to place them, you're going to wash your brush with some clean water and just wash the clean water onto both colours and let them just bleed together. It gives you an amazing tree effect. It makes the trees look round and it softens it. Picking up some more paint and just drawing on the damp paper now and leaving it all to bleed together, making it darker at the bottom. Having a few little branches breaking out the lower end of the tree trunk. The brush I'm using is a Chinese watercolour brush. They have very fine hairs. It makes a very fine line. I've had this brush for a number of years now. One of my favourite brushes to work with. And now just flicking up some grasses and small twigs and things breaking through the hedgerow. Just continuing it up and down with that dark colour mix of paint. Just putting in the little sticks and the little twigs that are coming through. Using the same dark mix, I'm putting another little tree in this small gap here. Using this wonderful Chinese brush that I've got, it gives you very fine lines. Being careful what you do. Don't rush, just take your time. You see here I've just got some water on my picture from the heel of my hand. It's marked the path, but it's not a problem. We're going to put some rocks there. So what I'm doing now is I've got the raw sienna and a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and it's making up the lighter foliage of the tree. I'm just very gently just scratching the brush downwards into the paper to create the impression of leaves on a tree. I'm putting the light colours on first, and that is the raw sienna and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And as it gets slightly darker down the bottom, I just add more blue to the mix. And what I do, I have the colours already mixed up on my palette, so I just dip into one and then dip into the other as I go. And on the right hand side of the tree, it's going to be slightly darker foliage, but I'll add that on when we come to it. Try not to cover the sun too much, so that the sun just shining through that tree. I'm adding a little bit of a lighter colour up here on this branch. This is a very dry brush that I'm using. What I do is I pick up the paint, touch it on a small kitchen roll or tissue, and then I use the roughness of the paper to give that lovely texture, like we do with the sparkly water on the first picture we ever painted. Again, you can put as much foliage on the trees as you like. You don't have to do exactly the same as me. You just do what you feel comfortable with. And there's no rush here. Just take your time. Here I've made up a light red mix with the raw sienna. This gives me a nice reddy brown colour of foliage on the tree here. And I'm adding in a little bit of the dark as we go. Picking up some more of the paint. Just adding a little bit more of the light red to the mix. Washing my brush and cleaning it. I'm picking up here. Now I've got a darker mix of ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of the light red, and just mixing them together to give me a very dark colour to represent the shadow side of the tree. I'm now starting again on this tree with the lighter shade of the raw sienna and a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and just scratching in, pushing down onto that surface of the paper. Not too hard, just hold the brush gently in an overhand fashion and just come down from the top with the lighter tones. Try to keep this one not as tall as the one in the front, to give the impression of it's a little bit further back. Adding a bit of foliage at the bottom. And again, you can do these trees however you like. If you're copying along with me and following along, stop the video when you need to and get onto the stages that I'm on and just work your way through. And taking your time, there's no rush. Adding a little bit more of the darker tones now. So mixing up the ultramarine blue, burnt umber a little bit of the light red, and now making it slightly darker, and that's giving this tree a chance to dry. So this again is wet paint on dry paper. And while I'm doing this tree, the tree at the back there is starting to dry, so that way you don't have to wait too long. You can just work on different parts of the picture as you go, leaving them to dry. A little bit more dark on this tree. Just want the edge of the tree to catch the light. Just continue with the dark, leaving the little front parts of the tree the lighter shade. In a moment I'm going to let this dry. And now I'm on the right hand side, flicking up grasses with the Ultramarine Blue, raw sienna and the burnt umber. Just flicking in grasses along the edge and over the surface to give the impression of shadows coming from the trees. Remember, the closer it gets to you, the darker the paint becomes. And by making it darker in the front, the foreground will disappear into the distance. When the grass comes out onto the path, keep it in line with the horizon line and straight. Now picking up some colour of the burnt umber and the ultramarine blue, and I'm now painting in that little mark that I left and made with the water that was on my hand. I'm turning it into a small stone and a few little rocks around it. First of all, what I do is I paint in the shapes that I want and place them where I want them to be, and then I'll come in and wet them again with some paint and water, and then use the gift card or the piece of stiff card and make little circle motions on it to create texture of stones and rocks on the path. In the hedgerow, I've put in some fence and some little wires there. Unfortunately, I did that and the camera wasn't working, so I'm very sorry about that. I didn't switch it on. So if you're looking there on the hedgerow, you'll certainly see some fences there, and that's where they came from. And the colour that I used for that was the same colour as the ultramarine blue and the burnt umber. And now putting on a stone at the front here, using the same colours. This one's going to be slightly bigger because it's closer. Adding some more colour to it. And just getting the shape right. To get ready for the gift card that I'm going to rub over the top in a moment. You can just see the tip of the rock there, so I'm making it bigger and darker. Just picking up some more paint and water now. I'm happy with the size of the rocks, so I'm just wetting them. Getting ready to get the gift card and make the marks on the rock. I'm going to come in closer here so you can see what I'm doing with the card. So I've wet the rock with some more water and paint, and gently just scratching in, not with the corner of the card, just with the side of the card, the shapes that I've just painted in the rocks, leaving texture on the surface. I'm going to pick up some more paint and some water and just put it onto this stone here, and I can show you again. It's getting closer. We're just scratching the surface of the paper, leaving textures on the stones. Continue doing the same with all the little stones and rocks on the path. A little bit of paint and water. And then using the little card, just very gently, just switch it from left to right, creating some textured stones. Very carefully, just try not to dig the corner of the card in, of the paper, and damage the surface. And there they are. Now I'm going to paint in the shadow, and that is a mixture of the Ultramarine Blue and light red, and just dragging it across with a dry brush just over the surface of the floor, keeping the brush flat and straight, and following the same angles throughout the whole of the picture, and following where the light source comes from. So hitting the rock, going over the top of the rock and down the other side. Each tree goes straight across. Coming up onto the bank. And now I'm picking up some more of the paint, and just with a dry brush effect, just scratching over the top of the surface of the paper to give the impression of dappled light coming through the tree and through the foliage of the tree. Remembering to put in the hedgerow shadow as well. Keeping the brush fairly flat and straight along as the horizon line will run. taking up some more of the paint. Just putting some shadow on the tops of the rocks. I'm just going to zoom out now so you can see what I'm doing with the dark colour over the top of the paper to create the effect of shadows from the trees and from the foliage. And also I'm going to mix up some here for the hedgerow and just coming along by the side. Just continuing dry brushing the shadow colour over the path. And at the back here I'd like to put in a couple of little people. They're two little carrot shapes, and there'd be one with a little dog, and they're just the two people out on the walk in the early morning through a country lane in Kent. I'll zoom in a minute so you can see what they look like. There's the two little carrot shapes. Make them a little bit longer. This one here is going to have a little dog on a lead. There he is, a couple of little dots there. I'm now just finishing off these two little people here, putting in the shadow. And I hope you've enjoyed watching this video as much as I have enjoyed painting it. I'm going to zoom out, put it in a mount, hang it on the wall so you can see what it looks like as a finished picture. Early morning walk. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next week. I'm Brian Davenport, watercolour artist.